Welcome to the Hud Grad Club. I'm Chris Webb, and I'm the Alumni Engagement Career Consultant with the University of Huddersfield's Careers Employability Service. And, full disclosure, I'm also a University of Huddersfield graduate. So I've generally got pretty positive things to say about both the institution and any of our graduates. But don't take my word for it. In this podcast, we'll be meeting different members of the University of Huddersfield's global alumni community, finding out what makes them tick, about their experiences during their time at the university and their career journeys since completing their studies. Join us as we explore the inspiring, innovative and diverse range of individuals that make up the Hud Grad Club. Hello and welcome back to the Hud Grad Club, our podcast celebrating the University of Huddersfield alumni community. And Daniel, a very warm welcome to the podcast.
Thanks a lot for having me. It's definitely a privilege to be reconnected to the university.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. Now, if we've got anyone who's listening or watching the podcast who's maybe not kind of come across you or your work before, can you just tell us a little bit more about what you studied at the university and what you're up to now?
Yeah, no, thank you so much. So I studied chemistry, actually. I did 3 years of chemistry, and then I was privileged enough to be selected to have an industrial experience here as well, as a research technician at the university for 6 months, and then also at a company called SKA Fabrics, who are also one of the leading fabric companies. And there I was a chemist and coming up with formulas to create specific colors for fabrics. What am I doing now? I'm currently a key account manager at a company called Avantor, and they're one of the largest life science companies in the world. And there I essentially support life science companies ranging from biotechs, pharmaceutical companies, and educational institutions, and ultimately supporting them achieve what they want to achieve in their lab and in their research.
Fantastic. Thanks, Daniel. I know we're going to also kind of dig into some of the stuff that you're doing outside of work at the moment, pretty significant work with the network that you've kind of created. So we'll perhaps kind of cover that a little bit later if that's okay.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine.
Fantastic. So we start every podcast, as always, with our greatest HUD story section. So this is very much an opportunity to kind of hear a bit more from you about your time at the university, kind of any particularly memorable experiences or just kind of reflections, I guess, from undertaking the degree that you studied at the university. So any particular HUD stories or kind of memories that you'd like to share on the podcast?
Yeah, actually, I've got a few of them. But one of the ones that kind of stand out was us winning the five-a-side tournament. There was a team that was really good, and everyone kind of saw them as the favorites of winning the tournament. So myself and some friends kind of gotten together and told ourselves, actually, we can beat them. So we formed a five-a-side team and went through the tournament and ultimately beating that top team. We were seen as the underdogs, but yeah, the audience was amazing, and we ended up winning the title as the five-a-side champion. So that was definitely one of the memories I can certainly remember, and I'm so proud of.
It's so interesting because you're not the only alumni to mention something like that. We had another kind of guest on the podcast. I'm trying to think back to who it was. I think possibly Sean Wright, I think, who talked about something very similar, like, really kind of abiding memory of success in sort of a football tournament. So great to hear that. And you talked at the kind of top of the podcast about your industrial placement experience as well. So tell us a little bit more about that. You did, I think you mentioned 2 placements, one at the university and one sort of externally. So yeah, what was that experience like for you as a student?
Yeah, it was definitely something that was very beneficial, and especially being a student. I mean, finances were very tight as a student. So I mean, most students can definitely relate to that. But the benefit of the industrial experience was actually I was able to acquire some skills, as well as it was a paid placement. So it was definitely something I could also benefit from a financial standpoint. But yeah, taking it back to studying, when we first started, one of the first things they said is you must get experience if possible. And Huddersfield Uni was known for placements. I think they called it sandwich years when I was at uni. And it was highly competitive. So because the uni emphasized enough from early, I made sure that in my first year, I did all I could. So I spent a lot of time in the library. Because one thing I remember was a lecturer saying that placements focus on your first year grades. So I spent hours and hours in the library with one of my friends, just kind of making sure that after every lecture, I made notes, read through them, and I kind of created a pattern. And yeah, ultimately I was able to finish my first year with a first class. So that kind of helped me in my application process when it became time to apply for potential placements.
Mm. And what was that, I guess, experience like, having that kind of time in industry sort of in the middle of the degree and then coming back to finish it? Because quite a few of our sort of previous guests on the podcast have talked a little bit about that, about I guess the sort of slightly jarring nature of leaving sort of your studies to kind of go into it, but then actually having to come back to finish your studies. What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, it was very interesting because a lot of students actually applied for industrial placement, but since it's very competitive, not many got it. So it kind of felt like everyone's going to final year except me. Everyone's about to graduate except me. I'm gonna have to join the other year group behind me in my final year. So it was kind of strange initially, but then once I started the placement, I saw it as a privilege because if many people didn't get it, then that kind of sets me apart already. And yeah, once I started, it was kind of I felt like an adult officially because you were expected to be there on time. There wasn't any flexibility. You had to be there on time, you leave on time, you're responsible for a task. Whereas at uni, there's a flexibility. So if you were in the lab and you made a mistake, someone could be there to support you, but at an industrial experience, you need to kind of deliver. And that kind of made me realize, okay, this is how it works when you're in the industry. There aren't many excuses. You kind of have to deliver and be accountable.
Mm. And I mean, thinking about, I guess, that transition from sort of student to graduate after finishing the degree, how helpful do you feel the placement was, I guess, in preparing you for that runway, I guess, out of university and kind of back into work?
A good question. I think it's priceless. I think having industrial experience is one of the best things you can have. And I'll definitely encourage anyone that is interested in industrial experience to not think about, I want to finish uni quick, but rather, what can I get out of uni? Industrial experience is just, it definitely sets you apart and it makes you grow quicker because when I went into my final year, I knew that this is what working life looks like. And if I can finish my uni degree fairly well, then when I'm applying for jobs, I can stand out a bit more. So it's one thing that I took very personally, and to the point at which I even helped other students who were behind me and prepare for their industrial experience applications. Some of them actually got industrial placements as well because I just saw it as being super important. So yeah, anyone that can take it should.
And did it sort of have an influence, I guess, on the type of jobs you applied for after sort of finishing the degree? Because I know for a lot of people, or a lot of guests on the podcast have talked previously about, the placement informing either what they liked or what they didn't like, I guess, about kind of aspects of work. But I know when we sort of talked off the podcast, you mentioned particularly with things like chemistry, often maybe there's a stereotype around what jobs you go into. So, did the placement sort of give you a bit of a steer as to what you then applied for or what type of jobs you were looking for once you finished?
Yes, it certainly did. So anyone that studies chemistry or any scientific discipline knows that it requires a lot of lab reports, a lot of time being spent in the lab. So because of that consistency in lab work, I kind of realized that lab work may not be for me. But then when I had my industrial experience, that kind of confirmed it even more. Not to say that was a bad experience. It was amazing. I really enjoyed it, but it just kind of made me realize that I can do something different. I can still contribute to science, and it kind of birthed a different personality in me. Because I'm naturally an introvert, so I was very comfortable in the lab. But then whilst I was in the lab, I realized actually, I can communicate pretty well because as a research technician, I had the privilege of speaking to the researchers on a daily basis. So at that point, I realized actually I can communicate. I do come across well. So therefore, it made me realize maybe I should consider other industries and other career paths. So it definitely helped me realize what I'm good at.
And tell us a bit more, I guess, around kind of commercial science, because I think, you've mentioned when we've spoken before, it's maybe an area that not everybody thinks of when they think of kind of jobs in STEM or kind of jobs in sort of science more generally. So, for those who maybe have never really kind of come across commercial science. But what does it mean, and what sort of jobs are involved within kind of the commercial science field?
Yeah, no, thanks a lot. Very good question. So I define commercial science as science where science meets the customer. And that's essentially anything that happens outside the laboratory. We can, for example, use the COVID vaccine. So when the research was being done and they found positive results, they weren't able to just distribute it and use it immediately. It required marketing, it required sales, it required regulatory compliance, required strategy. It requires a lot of different departments, and those are commercial science departments. The people in the lab do the amazing work, they do the research, but after then, it actually needs to meet the customer base, the patients, and that's what essentially commercial science is. It's anything scientific outside the laboratory. We're there to support the science reach various audiences and meet the right audience as well. And some of the roles involved, as mentioned, sales, marketing, technical support, application specialists. And those are roles which require you to use their scientific knowledge, but in a different way. So you still get to visit labs, but you are essentially there to improve their work. So if you have a solution for them to achieve their work at a higher standard or a more sustainable way, you could do that. And then also, let's say, for example, regulatory compliance. If you're a lab or if you work for a biotech and you found or you've discovered a solution to, let's say, a medical condition, your job is to make sure that your product or your item meets the requirements of various countries, because different countries have different requirements of their therapeutics, So that's just kind of to highlight some of the roles that commercial science entails.
Thanks, Andrew. It's super interesting, and I think it sort of links back. We had a podcast episode with one of our alumni, Matt Freeman, who worked in fundraising for the arts, and he was talking about this idea of hidden professions. Stuff that people just don't really think about. It's connected to maybe one industry, but they don't think about all the other roles that are important to keep that industry or that kind of field going. And I think that's the examples you've given are such important ones that in connection to science and commercial science that maybe people wouldn't be familiar about, perhaps stereotypically, but that, as you said, plays such an important function within those industries. How does that kind of relate, I guess, to the work you're currently doing? So, the role that you're kind of currently doing with Avantor, what does that sort of look like, and what aspect of commercial science are you involved in?
Yeah, so I essentially serve as a key account manager, and I manage pharmaceutical companies, biotechs, and universities. And in my role, I'm more focused on the sales aspect of it. I essentially speak to end users in the laboratory, understand the work that they do, and I'm there to essentially troubleshoot anything that happens in the lab. So if, for example, they aim to be more sustainable, I can come up with various ways that they can be more sustainable. And that could be through making their research more efficient. That could be through me actually suggesting or even providing demos of other items, equipment or reagents that they could use as well. And that's essentially sales. So I'm there to provide solutions, but ultimately, the more I sell, the more of a difference I make, the more I benefit financially. But like I said, I'm very passionate about science, and commercial science allows me to be still a contributor to science. I'm there to help them by providing solutions essentially, and that's how I kind of do my job.
And that theme, I guess, of sort of both helping people and sort of demonstrating that passion for science and commercial science in particular, I guess, has been exercised in another big way as well, which is, of course, the setting up and now the continuation of running the Afro-Caribbean Commercial Science Network. So I guess tell our listeners and viewers a little bit more about how did this kind of network come into being? What's its sort of purpose, and a bit more about the work that you've been doing on that front.
Yeah, no, thank you. The ACCSN, the Afro-Caribbean Commercial Science Center, is essentially my heart. It's my heartbeat. It's something that I'm very passionate about. The reason why I didn't mention it at the start is because I was trying to give you kind of a journey of how it began. So I started off in the lab through the industrial experience. I then realized actually I have some other traits that I could use. Let me go into commercial science. And then I went into commercial science and realized actually I've discovered another trait let me start a social enterprise, which then led me to the ACCSN. So there's actually been a progression, and a lot of scientists kind of sometimes can be limited, but I'm just trying to show that you can go from an undergrad to working in the laboratory to a non-traditional career path to then setting up something that you're very passionate about. So the ACCSN is essentially a diversity network specifically founded for Black and ethnic minorities and essentially trying to get them into the commercial science industry. And we aim to do that by raising awareness and getting rid of some of the barriers that may be in place because the industry has faced some challenges when it comes to getting diverse talent in. And we're trying to do that by tackle that challenge by providing mentorship, speaking engagements, consultation, networking and events, and one of the key areas is mentorship, being proactive mentors and making sure that anyone that's interested in having a mentor can get one without any barriers. So that's kind of what we're trying to do, boosting the representation, helping organizations have access to a talent pool because a lot of organizations tend to struggle to find that talent. And we've got a very large network of Black and ethnic minority scientists to solve that issue.
And I believe it's kind of you're growing all the time in terms of that network, but you're now sort of much more of a team, aren't you? You said you've got some great kind of volunteers who are now involved, and it sounds like the network's really been going from strength to strength. So how have you kind of seen it, I guess, develop from those initial shoots where you started it up to kind of where you are now?
Yeah, that's right. And we've been privileged to have it grow quite a lot. Started off from a WhatsApp group, it started off from a WhatsApp group with three of us in there, just kind of sharing our experience in the industry. Shortly after, people started adding their friends who are also scientists, undergrads, and yeah, then kind of kept on growing. And we've been able to have a team of 8 volunteers now who support me on this mission, who are also equally contributors as I am, and we're all passionate towards making that change because it's a career path that can be very beneficial, and the life science industry needs diversity to be more innovative and equally be profitable. So yeah, they all have scientific backgrounds. I'm a chemist, we've got biologists in the team, we've got bioengineers in the team, we've got physicists in the team, so we're quite diverse in the educational background as well. And the network currently has reached to over 2,000 Black and ethnic minority professionals as well as undergrads.
Wow, incredible. And I mean, you mentioned there obviously about kind of some very important people that are doing that work with you at the moment, and of course the value of mentorship for some of the kind of young people that you're helping. How about for yourself though, Daniel? So kind of thinking back through your career journey so far, have there been any particularly important people, I guess, that have had an impact on your career journey to date? And would you like to give any a shout out on the podcast?
Yeah, there've been quite a few of them, and they kind of how I ended up with them, I don't know. They took a liking to me, but just to really highlight, there weren't people that looked like myself. There were people that saw my will and my willingness to work hard and my willingness to learn, and yeah, they kind of saw me as someone that could provide change or make change, and they've been there to support me, and I call them allies. They understand that even though they've made it to a high level, it doesn't mean that everyone will have it as easy as them. And they've kind of picked me up. And what we've done is we've done reverse mentorship. I kind of give them information about my journey and my challenges, and they give me information of how they got into the rooms that they've gotten into. So it kind of goes both ways. As much as I benefit, they benefit from my experience. And yeah, I've had a few of them along the way. I actually still have some mentors now who are still supporting me, who want the best for my career as well as the ACCSN.
It's fantastic. And I think you talked earlier about that idea of, I guess, sending the ladder back down. You mentioned, you've done a placement supporting people, but then trying to get onto placement, and very similar with the work you're doing now. I think it's such an important point about that idea that, yeah, just because someone's made it, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be as easy for the next generation or different challenges. And so continuing to kind of be able to offer that sort of mentorship, I think is so important. So, I mean, Daniel, thanks so much for all of those reflections so far on your career journey to date. I guess kind of this leads really nicely into sort of the last part of the podcast, which is our underrated careers advice section, where we sort of give you a chance to reflect on, key learnings, I guess, from your career journey so far, or key bits of advice, nuggets of wisdom that you might want to share with any students or graduates who may be listening or watching the podcast. So I guess the $64,000 question is, do you have any underrated careers advice or key reflections from your career you'd like to share with us?
Oh, I've got a few. I would say that when you're at uni, network. I know that people talk about network when it comes to yeah, w working life, but I think it's important to also network at university because everyone would undertake their own path, and you may one meet each other again, and two you may require some assistance. You know, during my journey with the ACCSN, I've been able to turn back to some of the people that I worked with in during our lab sessions, you know, especially during our launch event. I forgot to mention in September we had a launch event at the Royal Society of Chemistry, at the Burlington House in central London. And yeah, even for that event, I had some of my old people that I used to be in the labs with, one attend and help me with setting up the whole event, which ended up being sold out. But it's just interesting as to how important it is to kind of stay connected with those people. So I'll definitely say keep networking, and also be so good they can't ignore you. Find a strength that you may have or a strength that you want to learn, which is quite niche, you know, and then kind of just hone in on that. Keep improving, keep reading about it, and then specialize. In my journey, I mean, as a chemist, I not once had any kind of social and entrepreneurial experience,
Mm,
but I knew that I had something that I could work with. So then I've been able to use what I had and kept on working at it, and then been able to grow it to a point where now I can do public speaking engagement. I can speak about commercial science. I can speak about some of the challenges. You know, I can cover diversity, equity, and inclusion topics, you know, in rooms where there are other specialists, you know, and those are things I had to learn and I had to
mm,
acquire. And I definitely also want to emphasize that scientists are the ones with the superpower. We can go into various industries, we can go into finance, we can go into tech, you know, we can go into law, you know, but a lot of people, or a lot of other people with other educational backgrounds can't go into science. You
mm,
know, that comes to show that as a scientist, there's something that we have to offer.
mm,
And it's important to be confident about that when we go into the industry. You know, I speak to a lot of scientists, they have a lot of imposter syndrome, you know, saying that, oh, I only got lab experience, but that lab experience has a lot of transferable skills. You know, it has skills such as risk mitigation, you know how to get rid of waste. You've got project management skills,
mm,
you know how to work as a team, you know how to do personnel development. For example, when you're in a group of people in the lab, there may be someone that doesn't get something as quick as you do. You're teaching them. That's personnel development,
mm,
which can help you when you get a job, because then you have skills of a manager, for example. And there's so many things that you can pick up from a degree in science. So definitely want to emphasize, make sure that you appreciate those skills that you have acquired. And then also, as many people may say, your network is your net worth. Who you know can sometimes be very important, you know, because sometimes it's not easy to stumble upon the right person at the right time. But the more people you know, the broader your network, and ultimately the more people you can reach out to. And yeah, don't be afraid. Take a leap when you need to, take that shot. As they
mm,
say, if you don't take many shots, you're less likely to score. So I definitely would encourage you to be bold, take a chance. And we're in a time where you can try things out, stop and try again. Whether it's you wanting to go for a job, whether it's you trying to embark on an entrepreneurial journey, you can always start, and then if it works, great. But if it doesn't work, then you can always start again, and always do risk to benefit. You know, if there's something that you want to try, if it works, just imagine the benefits of it, you know.
mm,
And if it doesn't work, just start again. But you do not want to kind of live with regret. I mean, like myself, it took me I think a year of planning the ACCSN without doing anything,
mm,
until I then realized actually I need to start. I need to at least try. And it's through trying that we've been able to grow so quickly. So yeah, just give it a go. And if you're not sure, speak to people you trust who will encourage you. And yeah, that's kind of the advice that I've got.
Yeah, I mean, fantastic. Kind of, I think 5 or 6 pieces of advice in there, Daniel, all really, really valuable. And I think, kind of as you've said there, there's such a value to following or seeing where your interests take you, and not necessarily having a fixed idea of what that might look like. I think you're a perfect example of that. Whereas you said you've kind of followed that progression from what might I be interested in, where's that taking me next? And actually developing, as you said, those skills and strengths along the way, and not necessarily kind of being wedded to this is the only thing that I can do. And as you said, look where that's kind of taken you now with social enterprise, with the ACCSN. So yeah, fantastic reflections. Speaking, I guess, of people and network being your net worth, if we've got kind of students, graduates listening or watching the podcast who may be interested in either connecting with you or kind of finding out about your work, the work of the ACCSN, where's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, good question. So on LinkedIn, my name is Daniel Similaki. So surname Similaki. And for the network, as I mentioned, we've got a mentorship program which is flexible, free of charge. You can find that on the ACCSN website and on our LinkedIn page. So on the LinkedIn page, there's a sign up button that you can register on. And once you've registered, you'll receive an email where you will be exposed to industry insights, downloadable resources free of charge. And then you also have an option of having an industry mentor as well, and then also job opportunities. So you could find us on our LinkedIn page and then also our website, which is www.theaccsn.com. And there you can find out more about our story, our current sponsors, as well as some of our allies who are supporting the mission. So there are various avenues that you can reach out to us for, and we're here to help you. If you are thinking of joining a network, or you're someone who's currently studying science, feel free to join. There's so much experience in the network. And then if you're there wanting to maybe start a group but just don't know how to, then I'm also there to support and kind of give back to university, as the University of Huddersfield has been, it's been an experience that's definitely helped me in my career so far.
Oh, such a brilliant offer. Thanks, Daniel. And if you're kind of watching the podcast, as always, what you will see is kind of down on the bottom of the screen, we will have flashed up the links that Daniel's just referred to. And if you're not watching, but you're listening and you're on Spotify, if you check the podcast notes, you again will find the links to the ACCSN website, the LinkedIn page, Daniel's LinkedIn, if you do want to connect, get in touch, or just find out what it's all about. So that really takes us very nicely to the end of the podcast. And all that's really remains to be said is a massive thank you, Daniel, for joining us today, sharing your kind of career journey so far, and becoming the latest member of the Hud Grad Club.
Thank you so much.
Enjoyed the podcast? Then go to the University of Huddersfield YouTube channel for all of our future episodes. Subscribe, like, and don't forget to hit the bell button for notifications. If you'd like to be involved in the Hud Grad Club podcast moving forward, please get in touch with us on alumni@hud.ac.uk.